Hello everyone, and welcome to this Amazon Lumberyard tutorial video. In this video we'll be importing a terrain height map, megaterrain texture and splat maps into Lumberyard from L3DT. First we need to open L3DT. Now what we're essentially doing is making a terrain, and then we're going to be creating a far away texture that we're going to use just so that from far away that's the texture you see, but up close we'll have more detailed textures. So we'll click File, New Project, and then choose Desirable Map. Now there is a tutorial option under Help, which I strongly recommend you go through if you haven't used this software before. For the height field size, we're going to go for a 512 by 512 map, and we're going to go horizontal scale of 1 and leave the other options unticked. We'll leave this at the default value, and here you should just play around with these settings. Now I find a value, so the default climate is Spring Green World, which I think creates some very fantasy-like textures, which is why we're going to be using it. You can go through each option and configure it how you like. Now here we need to select the design map, the height field, the attributes map and the texture map, and then click Next. Under here we're going to be unticking the Use Light map. We're going to tick Interpolate Textures and allow strata overlays, and for anti-aliasing we're going to set it to a low value because we're going to be experimenting a bit before we export the final image. For now we do not want to tick Make High Resolution Texture for the same reason. Now you'll see there's quite a lot of sand here, which I don't necessarily want. And you can see quite a lot of it is below sea level, which is what those red lines mean, and this is not going to get imported into Lumberyard correctly. So what we need to do is edit our design map by using a square brush of size about 5. We want to increase the altitude by about 20 meters per click. Oops, I made a minus 20 instead of plus 20. And we just want to click it a few times until no more water is shown. And this should hopefully bring the terrain up a bit. And we then want to recalculate this, so we just have to tick height field, attributes and texture map again. And again we want to generate these without high resolution or anti-aliasing because we're going to be changing it a lot more. Now I just decided to speed this bit up, but what we've done is I've just been configuring this to my liking. I've decided I want a lake in the middle of my map, so once I get rid of all the sand on the edges, I'm going to be making some dents in the bottom so that there's some sand. However, it isn't low enough to reach sea level, which is what causes an issue when importing into Lumberyard. So now what we need to do is we need to regenerate these again. However, this time for textures we want to set the anti-aliasing quite high and set the max resolution texture to until it reaches 2048 by 2048. Now sadly in the free version of L3DT you can't go above this texture size. If you had the pro version you could make even higher resolution textures. Now we want to go to the height field, right click and choose Export. Here we want to choose the ASC format, and it's because we need a 32-bit file to import into Lumberyard so that we don't end up with blocky looking terrain. I'm just going to save this into my textures folder for my project, and I'll name it something like RPG underscore height 1. Leave the rest and click OK. Now we want to go to the texture map, right click and choose Export, set the file type to BMP, and then save it here. I'll save it as RPG underscore mega. Now we need to generate the splat maps, which is how we're going to be able to paint the grass on the grass sections of this texture, so when we get detailed grass we can put them only on the grass sections without having to hand paint everything. So we go to this generator, And here you'll see there's quite a few things. So if you look at the material and you make that section a bit wider, you can see the different names. So there's grass, steep grass, cliff face, beach sand, and rock slope. Now, the grass and steep grass are quite similar, so I'm going to put them on the same texture, on the same splat map texture. The cliff face is quite important, so we're going to put this on its own thing, and so is the beach sand. Now the rock slope, while there's not much of it, it does add a bit of variation, so we'll leave that as a separate texture too. You can import your own textures to use here, but make sure that they're not very high resolution, since this is not the detail map, this is just the general color information for your entire world. We'll go for an 8-bit. If you had the Pro version, you could go higher, however Lumberyard doesn't support this for megaterrain textures, so just leave it at 8-bit. Set the file format to BMP. The number of textures is 4 because we ended up with 4 channels in the previous section. Set the anti-aliasing fairly high. We can't use any of the other options, but then we'll just export these alpha maps. I'll just save them as RPG_splats. Now this might take a while, but once it's finished we'll have all these textures that we can see here. So alpha 1 was the grass, alpha 2 was the cliffs, 3 was the beach sand, and 4 was just that rock for variation. Now as you can see, these are all relevant to those alpha IDs that we set up before. You'll see in the directory where we saved them that they're all there, along with the project files. So we'll just save this project, and then move on to configuring these textures for Lumberyard. Now in Photoshop, you're going to want to get the megaterrain texture, and we're going to want to, basically, it's a bit too bright, because we want to keep this kind of realistic with a slight touch of fantasy. So we're going to lower the brightness and contrast a bit on this image. So we'll go to Image, Adjustments, and Brightness/Contrast. Now we want to lower the brightness by 150 and lower the contrast by about 28. Now I had made some more adjustments here, however I decided not to do them in the end, so I've just skipped those from this video. We want to save it as a BMP, and we'll save it as Mega 1. Now we should probably go for the highest depth, however it doesn't really matter here, but we'll just go with 32-bit. It doesn't matter since Lumberyard only supports 8-bit for the megaterrain texture. However, if you don't have Photoshop, you can just open this image in Photos, go to Edit and create an edit, and then just go to Adjust and lower the brightness, and then save it. If you need to lower the brightness again, then you can just do this again with the second image. However, since I have an image from Photoshop, I'm not going to save this. Or at least I'm not going to be using this in Lumberyard. Now we'll move on to actually getting these textures into Lumberyard. So quite a few of the files in this directory aren't actually necessary. So what we're going to do is just select them. So for instance, we don't need those folders, we don't need that original BMP, we don't need these XML files or the HTML files or the PNGs, since we're using the bump maps. Instead I'm just going to move these to another directory, for instance pictures, just in case I need to reopen this project later to make some more configurations. These are the textures that we're actually going to bring into Lumberyard. So now we're going to go and launch Lumberyard, and this might take a while, so we're just going to come back when it finishes opening. Once it's open, we want to click New Level, name it something like, for instance, World 1, and we want to set the height map resolution to 512 by 512 since that's our height map size. And click OK. And now here we want to select 2048 by 2048 image, since that's our texture size. Now we want to open up the terrain editor. First we want to go to set terrain height and set this to something fairly low, like maybe 128. Now we'll go and get our height map and import it. As you can see in the viewport, it's imported our terrain and it doesn't look blocky at all because it's a 32-bit file. Now I'm just going to look around and see if it looks around about right. I think it might be a bit too high up, so we might set the terrain height a bit lower, 26. Now you don't have to keep this as a power of 2, however I just like doing that because it makes things a lot easier, or at least in my head it makes it easier to manage. And that looks about right. Now we need to go to Export Import Megaterrain. We'll select this tile and change the tile resolution to 2K. Then we'll click Import. Now later on we'll be splitting this into multiple tiles so that we can have the edges of the map be a lower resolution to not waste memory on areas where the user will probably not go. But for now we'll just leave it how it is. As you can see, our texture, our megaterrain texture has been imported. In the next video we'll go over using the splat maps with detailed textures from whichever source you like. We'll be using megascans, so that up close it looks far more detailed than it currently does. We want to go to Game, Terrain, and then Generate Terrain Texture, and choose the 2K and click OK. And this is just so that this gets compressed so that it doesn't waste as much performance while we're moving around in the viewport and adding new things. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned until next time.